What if I told you that some of the strongest women in human history were not modern athletes, not warriors, but Neanderthal women, muscular, resilient, and capable of feats of strength that would put even today's champions to shame? Fossil evidence reveals they weren't just survivors of the Ice Age. They were hunters, fighters, and mothers who helped shape the destiny of humankind. And as science digs deeper into their bones, DNA, and even their possible language, a picture emerges of women far more powerful, intelligent, and influential than we ever imagined. Even if you have never been deeply interested in fossils, caves, or the science of human paleontology, the story of Neanderthal women forces us to confront a truth far more fascinating and unsettling than the stereotypes we were taught. These women were not fragile gatherers hiding behind stronger males, but powerhouses of survival whose strength, adaptability, and resilience shaped the fate of their communities and indirectly our own species. Classified as Homo neanderthalensis, or sometimes Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, these archaic humans branched away from our direct lineage around 500,000 years ago and thrived in the brutally cold landscapes of Ice Age, Europe and parts of Western Asia before disappearing roughly 40,000 years ago. Yet in that long span of existence, they developed physical and behavioral traits that pushed the boundaries of what we think human beings are capable of. And female Neanderthals stood right at the heart of this evolutionary drama. Their skeletons, preserved in caves from France to Croatia to the Middle East, reveal startling truths. They were shorter and stockier than modern women, but with bodies engineered for raw endurance, conserving heat in freezing climates while performing daily tasks of staggering intensity. And perhaps most surprising of all, scientists have shown that they possessed up to 10% more muscle mass than modern European men, meaning that by sheer physiology alone, they could outmatch most of us today in terms of strength, grip, and physical output. Their arm bones are particularly telling, scarred with heavy muscle attachments that reveal lifetimes spent hauling carcasses, crafting tools, and likely even taking part in dangerous hunts alongside their male counterparts, not as passive observers, but as equally vital participants in the relentless pursuit of survival. Consider the famous specimen La Ferracie II, discovered in a French cave, whose remains revealed such dense musculature in the upper arms that experts have compared her gripping power to that of elite modern athletes. And she was not unique in this regard, but rather typical of her species. Neanderthal women, like their male peers, lived in small groups, hunted massive Ice Age beasts such as mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses, endured bitter winters, and carried the responsibility of ensuring food, clothing, and child rearing in an environment that demanded every ounce of energy they had. Fossil injuries provide further proof, because female skeletons often display the same fractures and trauma patterns as male skeletons, strongly implying that both sexes engaged in hunting and other high-risk activities, rather than following the division of labor familiar to modern agricultural societies. And this shatters long-held assumptions about the gender roles of our ancestors. Imagine a woman dragging heavy beaver carcasses out of icy marshes to skin them for hides, sewing garments with bone needles using glues made from birch or pine tar, then carrying bundles of meat up steep mountain slopes, all while protecting her children and assisting in communal life within caves lit by firelight. These were not delicate figures. They were warriors, providers, and survivors in equal measure, and their bodies tell the story in bone, sinew, and density. Consider too the skulls of female Neanderthals, such as Gibraltar's Jalta I, which reveal massive brow ridges, thick jawbones, and powerful necks capable of supporting elongated skulls housing brains as large as, or in some cases larger than, those of modern humans, averaging around 300 cubic centimeters. This physical robustness extended to their hormonal balance as well. It is likely that Neanderthal women had higher testosterone levels than modern females, which, coupled with their active lifestyle, contributed to their exceptional muscle mass and endurance. Archaeological discoveries also suggest that their daily workload produced bone densities comparable to modern female athletes, especially rowers and runners, indicating that their skeletons were adapted to constant stress, load-bearing, and motion. Some specimens, like the massive female Neanderthal unearthed near the French Riviera, initially puzzled scientists because her size and strength were so immense that she was first misclassified as male. only later revealed to be female when studied in detail, a revelation that underscores just how physically extraordinary these women were. Another fascinating case comes from the Denisovan lineage in Asia, where a large female specimen, possibly a cousin to Neanderthals, weighed over 170 pounds, rivaling or exceeding most modern men, showing that Stone Age women across Eurasia were often giants of physicality compared to us today. But strength alone does not define them. These women also carried the evolutionary legacy of language, intelligence, and adaptation. 4 genetic studies have revealed that Neanderthals shared with us the FOXP2 gene associated with speech, and their hyoid bones suggest they could produce a range of vocal sounds, meaning Neanderthal women likely communicated with their families in spoken language, teaching children, coordinating hunts, and passing on survival knowledge. The interplay of strength, intelligence, and adaptability paints a picture of beings who were not outliers on the fringes of humanity, but central figures in its unfolding drama. And when we think of a Neanderthal woman, we should not imagine a primitive cave dweller, but rather a resilient matriarch capable of leading, protecting, and building communities under conditions that would destroy most modern humans within days. Their skulls, their bones, their preserved tools, and the DNA lingering in our bloodlines remind us that these women were part of the human story, shaping its trajectory with every step, every hunt, every child raised in the icy shadows of the Pleistocene. While the physical power of Neanderthal women is enough to astonish anyone, their story goes deeper than muscle and bone, because locked within their skulls' DNA and cultural traces is a mystery that speaks to the very heart of human evolution. How did these women influence the survival of their groups? And how did their existence shape us, the modern humans who carry fragments of their bloodline even today? Fossil evidence, genetic studies, and archaeological finds reveal that Neanderthal women were not just participants in survival. They were innovators, healers, and carriers of knowledge across generations, bridging the harshest ages of the Ice Age with resilience and ingenuity. Consider their role in hunting. Their bone injuries mirror those of men, showing that they likely stood side by side with males as they confronted massive Ice Age prey like woolly mammoths, bison, and cave bears. But their physiology suggests they brought unique advantages to this struggle, not just brute strength but also endurance, precision, and stamina that balanced the explosive power of their male counterparts. Their stockier builds and denser bones meant they were less prone to fractures. Their grip so powerful that stone tools were wielded with efficiency that few modern humans could match. And even the act of preparing hides, grinding plants, and butchering animals demanded strength equivalent to modern athletes performing heavy labor for hours each day. Yet strength alone did not define their value to Neanderthal communities. They were also at the center of social cohesion, raising children, sharing food, crafting clothing from hides stitched with bone needles and glued with tar, and passing on oral traditions through what many researchers now believe was a form of structured speech. The FOXP2 gene, shared between Neanderthals and modern humans, along with the shape of their vocal anatomy, makes it almost certain that Neanderthal women spoke, taught, and even comforted their young with language. Their voices resonant and perhaps deeper than ours, carrying across caves and forests as they organized tasks and kept groups united. This communication would have been essential, because Neanderthal social groups were small, perhaps only 20 to 30 individuals, meaning each woman's role was magnified in importance, and the survival of the group often rested on her ability to hunt, nurture, and heal. Their cultural contributions shine through in unexpected places, such as traces of plant fibers, suggesting that Neanderthal women may have twisted threads into cords, creating the first string technology that revolutionized toolmaking, clothing, and shelter. While evidence of medicinal plant residues in dental calculus hints that these women may have used herbal remedies, experimenting with plants that soothed pain or fought infection. Their skulls also tell us that their brains, often as large as or larger than those of modern humans, were wired differently, with expanded visual and motor regions that suggest heightened perception and bodily control, traits that may have made them formidable trackers and gatherers, able to notice subtle changes in the environment and coordinate physical movement with uncanny efficiency. The Jalta 1 skull from Gibraltar, discovered long before Neanderthals were even recognized as a species, shows the pronounced brow ridges and elongated brain case typical of the species, features that gave their faces a fierce appearance, but also supported powerful muscles for chewing and speaking, and even in females these traits were prominent, underscoring just how robust their anatomy truly was. Hormonal evidence adds another layer to their story. For Neanderthal, women likely had higher testosterone levels than modern women, amplifying their muscle growth, bone density, and perhaps even influencing their assertiveness within social groups, suggesting that gender dynamics among Neanderthals may not have mirrored those of later agricultural societies where men dominated physically and socially. Some anthropologists argue that the very survival of these groups depended on the equal contribution of both sexes, with Neanderthal women carrying loads of meat, defending against predators, and participating in hunting strategies that demanded courage and coordination, roles that blur the lines of what we often think of as prehistoric gender roles. And then, there is the question of interbreeding. Because genetic evidence shows that modern humans carry 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, and studies suggest that much of this came from unions between modern human men and Neanderthal women more than 100,000 years ago. Encounters that were not isolated events but recurring moments of contact, producing children who carried forward hybrid traits that still echo in our biology today, from immune system advantages to hair and skin variations. The very fact that modern humans mated with Neanderthal women tells us that they were not strange, alien beings but familiar enough, human enough. That attraction and reproduction were possible and even common, and their genes live on in us as quiet testaments to their importance in our story. Archaeological sites across Europe and Asia reveal that these women also adapted clothing and tools to the environments they inhabited, creating tailored hides, sewn with skill to withstand freezing temperatures, crafting jewelry from animal bones and shells, and leaving behind evidence of symbolic thought, suggesting they had a sense of identity and belonging not unlike our own. The Cro-Magnon women who appeared later, tall and agile descendants of anatomically modern humans, contrasted with Neanderthal women in build and agility, but the overlap between these groups was not just competitive. It was genetic, cultural, and evolutionary, with Neanderthal women influencing the genetic makeup of populations that would one day give rise to modern Europeans. In fact, their larger pelvises and strong lower bodies, adaptations for childbirth and survival in harsh terrains, reveal a reproductive resilience that ensured the continuation of their kind across thousands of years of adversity. Their contributions to hunting, tool-making, child-rearing, and social cohesion make it impossible to dismiss them as background figures. And instead, they emerge as central players in one of the most fascinating chapters of human history. By studying their bones, their DNA, and the remnants of their lives, we see a picture not of primitive beings on the margins of humanity, but of powerful, intelligent, adaptive women whose legacy continues in us today, even if we seldom recognize it. To reduce their story to extinction is to miss the point entirely, because Neanderthal women shaped human history through strength, adaptation, and interbreeding, leaving fingerprints on our very DNA and teaching us that survival in the Ice Age was not just about who was stronger, but about who could endure, innovate, and unite a group against overwhelming odds. And yet, for all that science has uncovered about Neanderthal women, their story remains incomplete, because every fossil fragment, every DNA strand, and every artifact points to mysteries still waiting to be solved. And in these gaps lie some of the most fascinating questions about what it truly means to be human. Were Neanderthal women capable of the same depth of emotion and symbolic thought as modern humans? Did they tell stories around fires, sing to their children, or carve markings that represented identity and memory? And if so, does that mean the boundary we draw between us and them is little more than an illusion of time? What we do know is that their role in human history cannot be erased. Their bones tell of struggle, survival, and strength. Their DNA whispers from within us, shaping our immune systems, our bodies, even subtle aspects of our behavior, and their cultural legacy lingers in the idea that intelligence and endurance are not confined to one lineage, but are shared across the wider human family. The tragic truth is that about 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals disappeared, their last strongholds in caves across Europe and Asia going silent, their footprints fading under the advance of modern humans, But their extinction was not absolute, for they live on in our bloodlines, and perhaps even in our memories, encoded in stories of ancient giants, in myths of powerful women, in the subconscious recognition that we are not alone in our past. Some scientists suggest that Neanderthal women may have struggled with declining population numbers, reduced genetic diversity, and the pressures of climate change that shrank their habitats, while others point to increased competition with incoming modern humans as a decisive factor. But regardless of the cause, the legacy they left behind is profound. They teach us that survival is not only about who dominates, but about who adapts, shares, and endures. And in a way, they challenge us to rethink the very definition of humanity. If Neanderthal women could hunt, heal, nurture, speak, create art, and bear children who live on in us today, then how different were they really? And should we not honor them as part of our own extended family, rather than as evolutionary failures? Their story is not a footnote in prehistory, but a reminder that human evolution was never a straight line, never a tale of one group triumphing over another in isolation, but a braided river of interactions, exchanges, and unions that shaped who we are. To look into the deep shadowed eyes of a Neanderthal woman reconstructed from bones is to see not a stranger, but a relative, tougher, stronger, perhaps even wiser in ways we no longer understand, but undeniably human. And so when we ask ourselves what it means to be human, perhaps the answer is not found in separating us from them, but in recognizing that without them, without the Neanderthal women who hunted, fought, cared, and loved in an unforgiving Ice Age world, we would not exist as we do today. Their blood runs in our veins, their strength resonates in our bones, and their survival story is also ours.